Welcome to the show, everyone. It's the Crypto Lark. I'm super excited to have back on the show today Naomi Brockwell. Naomi, how's it going?
Going pretty well, Lark. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. For those of you who may not know Naomi, she is the Bitcoin girl, has a lot of different Bitcoin related music videos out there on the internet, as well as being a really just a massive part of the crypto community, having emceed lots of the top cryptocurrency events, as well as making fantastic content on her YouTube channel about privacy and Bitcoin and all kinds of fun and interesting topics. There'll be a link down below to her YouTube channel, so do go and subscribe to that. But today we're going to be talking about really what's going on with this crazy crisis, how governments are using this crisis as a way to take away our privacy, and just the bailouts and Bitcoin and all that fun kind of stuff. So stick around. It's going to be a great, great chat. And Naomi, I think we should hop right in with a nice juicy one. Did we learn
All
nothing
right.
from 2008? This crash happened. It was terrible. Banks looted everything, and now here we are in 2020. What's going on?
Did we learn nothing? I think it's the opposite, Lark. I think we learned everything from that, which is why it's all happening again. And what I mean is that government got a taste for how easy it is to print huge amounts of money, inject it straight into the pockets of all of their crony friends. And I mean, we still haven't had an audit of the TARP bailouts from '08. We don't know where all of that money went. And the government, I think people in power realized how much power they could garner by having that leverage tool to be able to say, well, we have all of this money to dispose of. Who wants it? Put up your hand. What have you got to offer? And so, yeah, they learned a great lesson of how easy that was. So now we've rolled around. This is basically the same process, but it's on steroids now, right? The amount of money that they're printing is astronomical. There are trillions of dollars in corporate bailouts. And once again, the people are getting screwed. So I think at the end of the day, yes, individuals did not become suddenly economically literate. They're looking at this $1,200 check that the US government is saying, well, we're going to send you this stimulus package, $1,200. That's going to be fine for you being shut in your house for months, not being allowed to work. That will tide you over, I'm sure. Meanwhile, they're handing trillions of dollars to their crony corporate friends, and no one bats an eyelid because they were able to, just grease people's agreement with all of this by giving them something in turn, like throwing them crumbs. So I think it's the same thing happening over again. It's history repeating. And what we learned from '08, like when we have these emergency measures, they're not emergency measures, they last. And I think this is something that we definitely need to keep in mind, especially when we start to talk about privacy and how we're dealing with the crazy crackdown in terms of surveillance that is happening right now, or the policies being implemented. I think it's a scary slope, to be honest.
It really is. I think you make a great point that when we do see these things happening, they rarely get rolled back later on. So, oh, it's just now, it's just during the emergency, and then 10 years down the line, we're still saying, hey, why is this still the case? Why are we still doing
Mm-hmm.
these things?
This
And
emergency measure, and suddenly you realize this emergency never ended, and yet people keep buying it. They keep saying, oh, well, it's just an emergency, it's just a stopgap measure. And these things, as you said, they never get rolled back. And we should, especially when we're talking about privacy solutions right now, because there's all kinds of surveillance technology out there. And honestly, if people want to create contact tracing apps and use them, I think that's great. Individuals can choose to use these things, but if governments are going to be saying, like, we mandate you use this this app, and we're going to have access to wherever you are at any given time, it's all going to be identifiable to your person, it's just further surveillance. And we need to be really careful with what measures and what invasion into our privacy we're going to allow right now, knowing that this is going to stay in place for the next 20, 30, 50 years. This is
until they
not going
cook
to
up
be rolled
something
back.
new and worse.
Yeah, it's not going to be rolled back. And I think too often people, it's like a high stake. It's a high stake selling environment, where the government's like, quick, we're going to do something immediately. Let's pass this bill that has all of these really important things because we have to act. Your time is of the essence. And people go, oh, okay, just pass the thing, pass it quick, guys. And they don't read these things. And then like policies, people don't kick up a fuss because people are like, well, we need all of this tracking stuff, and so just pass it, mandate it all. Let's get a hold on this thing. And it's just such a terrible I hate that people fall for this stuff, but they do every time, because there's high stakes environments, high pressure sales, you could call it. It just hurts all of us, because at the end of the day, as you said, these are not things that are just going to be around while this emergency is going on. These are going to be around forever. These things don't get rolled back. So we just need to look at what's actually being implemented and decide, is this the future that we want to be creating right now with these policies?
It's very interesting points there. And I think one of the things is that there's no one to help us. This is something people need to realize. I mean, back in 2008, I mean, the Occupy Wall Street movement came out of that, and that was short-lived and a bit disorganized. And I think, the media ignored and then vilified, and then it was kind of over, right? And people had to go back to doing stuff. Whereas you're up against this behemoth of these banks that have nothing but, they have thousands of full-time lobbyists working to pursue their interests and to bribe politicians and to get their policy initiatives passed. I mean, I think that, I can't remember which leak it was that came out, but it showed that in Obama's entire first cabinet was chosen by Citibank. I mean, the level of corruption going on in governments, and both parties agree on it. This is the thing, or take it across countries, not just the US. I mean, most parties in any given government agree on the general narrative of, this is how banking is done, this is how power is given over to the elites, and this is how we take away privacy from our citizens.
Yeah, no, it's devastating. And I just I'm reading your poster in the background, because honestly, this is so Orwellian when you say war is peace. So, what's it else?
War is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength.
Yeah, it's this Orwellian doublespeak where they say things like that to get these things passed. They say, they give us these false choices, and they make us buy into this system that is hurting all of us. And really, you're just selling your right to make choices about your own life, and you're selling it to the highest bidder and opting into mob rule people to make decisions about how you live your life. I mean, it's just such a, it's a crazy situation in general, but right now we're in particular danger because we have all of these big decisions to make. I mean, right now, honestly, there are systems around the world that are so stressed right now that some people are saying, well, this is crazy, we're on the verge of collapse as a society. This could, when you're looking at 6 million people in a single week filing for unemployment, and then just so many more millions across the world just being unemployed, people are predicting that 40% of the population might end up being unemployed as a result of all of this, and the lockdowns of businesses, etc. I mean, that's the recipe for civil unrest, absolutely. And so I think that when you're dealing with such a high stakes environment like that, some people say, well, society could collapse entirely and this would be scary, and let's protect ourselves, and we're about to enter into this, crazy Hunger Games scenario or something. I don't know. But other people are saying, no, this is the perfect opportunity. These systems are stressed. This is a great chance to build something better, to implement better strategies and better systems and better policies. And, that's a really difficult thing to do, but it's not completely out of the question. You're looking at people taking matters into their own hands already. Like when the FDA screwed up so badly with testing, and when they had a monopoly on testing, they banned any competition in testing, and then they screwed up the tests. So America was just so underprepared for everything going on. And then not only that, but then they started banning the innovation coming out where people were picking up the slack. They started banning at-home testing. They made it so that all the testing had to go through a single state. You couldn't do testing in your own state. That went on for a month. I mean, that blows my mind. But you have systems like that, and people started to just say, okay, I'm just going to go around you and not ask for permission. And people started to do things. People started to 3D print masks. People started to use their, computing hashing to, folding for a cure, to fold proteins, to start to look at, how we can help in this situation. When you have people being told where they can spend their money, what price they have to, what they are allowed to spend, how much they are allowed to spend on these goods, which businesses are essential, which businesses are not, you see people start to say, well, I'm going to find alternatives. I'm going to go around. I'm going to maybe use online marketplaces that aren't as heavily monitored as Amazon, for example. You have these small, in towns, you have these little ecosystems set up where people are buying and selling goods from each other rather than going to their usual places. And there's this whole shift that's happening in society as people are taking matters into their own hands. And I think that something like that could be exciting if you use it in the right way. This sort of idea of agorism, where you can go around the existing systems that don't work. My hope more than ever is that through this process, we learn how corrupt and inept the government is with all of their awful policies that they've implemented and awful reactions. And just like this, the corruption, I mean, just blows my mind in all of this and the devastation that they've caused as a result of everything that's going on. But I hope that people start to wake up to this and find better systems and start to use these systems. That's what I'm praying for at the end of all this.
Hopefully, we can hope anyway. I think to an extent, honestly, we are starting to see, at least if we talk about, let's talk about the cryptocurrency aspect here. We are seeing to an extent people starting to move into this. I mean, we've seen big volumes picking up across Latin American crypto exchanges, for example. Argentina, we're seeing record volumes. In Venezuela, we're seeing record volumes. Colombia, Brazil, on and on. We're seeing a lot of new interest from people, and it's coming at the exact time. It's not just, I think, the people want to hop in and grab some quick gains. I mean, there's those people too, right? There's definitely the speculators coming in, but I think we're seeing a lot of people coming in for the unique aspects of cryptocurrencies that you can't evade capital controls. We see capital controls affecting a lot of countries where people can't send sometimes any money out. We've seen that in Lebanon, where you can't send any money without getting special permission, which it basically means that if you're rich and connected, you can do whatever
Right.
you want, and if you're not rich and connected, well, you have to come begging for scraps from the banks if you can get anything at all, which is a broken system. And so we've seen these volumes picking up, and everywhere, really. I mean, even major exchanges like Kraken, for example, we've seen, I think they said they saw an 83% increase in signups or something like that. So we see a lot of new people coming into the crypto space at the exact same time that we see the governments. I mean, I think the US is the absolute worst offender when it comes to this. I mean, how many trillions? I've literally lost count of how many trillions. It's 2 trillion there. It's a trillion for Wall Street. It's 3 trillion over here. It's $500 billion here. I mean, the one thing I think it's such an egregious example of how screwed up the whole system was the small business loan situation, where they had $350 billion set aside for small businesses. Almost all of it went to big businesses. The banks took $10 billion in fees to do almost no work except to take money from the government and hand it straight to their friends by taking a nice little chunk in the middle. So it's a crazy system. It was disgusting. So what role do you see with crypto playing here? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to mention what you were saying before about this uptick that we've seen. I think this is completely to be expected. If we think about the conditions that led to Bitcoin becoming popular in the first place, it was '08, we had this giant economic collapse, you had all these corporate bailouts, you had all of this corruption, you had just a printing press going crazy. And then someone released this white paper and said, here's an alternative money. And I think that these days when people get into crypto, especially in the last few years, they get into it and they're like, what's the price? How can I speculate on this? You know, how can I flip it back and forth? And they don't really understand why Bitcoin had so many impassioned users, people who were like changing their entire lifestyle to fight for this. They were like, it's just a money. Like they didn't guess it. But the fact is in '08, people were so angry about what was going on. They were disgusted at the policies that the government was enacting, and they wanted a better way. Now, right now, we're in the midst of another financial crisis, right? And people are starting to get that same feeling of why it's so important to have alternatives. They're seeing the corruption in traditional finance. They're seeing the corporate bailouts. They're seeing all the cronyism and the politicians just lining the pockets of their friends. People are angry, and they're starting to look at alternatives. Now, this is the first crisis that we've had since we've had Bitcoin, since we've had cryptocurrency in general. So I'm very interested to see what's going to happen here. You know, I don't know whether there's going to be hyperinflation or inflation in general. We didn't really see it in '08, so I don't know whether that's going to be something that we're going to see this time, even though the government is really ramping up policies that they even did in '08. It's on a much larger scale this time, but who knows? Maybe the Fed's able to juggle this, and we don't really see the inflation that a lot of people are like the apocalypse people are predicting. But I think that even if, like, first of all, people worried about that, so they're getting involved. But second of all, people just want out of this system. It's unfair, it's unjust. And so I, like, more than ever, I'm looking to the people who are providing everyday use cases for cryptocurrency. It's not just that I want people to hold and buy so that they have reserves if things hit the fan and all of their money goes to trash because it's just being inflated away, right? I actually, that's great, and I love that, and I think it's good to have a hedge just in case and diversify. But I also want to see people pulling their power away from traditional finance. I want to see people closing their bank accounts. You know, right now, I don't think we're going to have bans on, you know, whether or not you can get your money out. I think we're just going to see banks ramping up the bureaucracy, all of the hoops that they have to jump through to get to their money. There's not going to be some, oh, we don't have the money, you can't come here, or there's only $5,000 a day you can access, or whatever. I don't think we're going to see that. I think we're going to just be wading through this molasses of bureaucracy, so it's going to be harder than ever, and that's how the banks are going to safeguard themselves, because they don't have the money that people want to get out, right? They don't have it. I want to see people pull that power away. Don't rely on them to give you permission to access your own money. Have money in crypto that you're using every day. Buy your groceries with crypto, buy your gas or petrol with crypto, pay your bills with crypto. All of this stuff is possible now. We have had 10 years of development. We have all kinds of third parties that make this a whole lot easier. Places like Bitrefill make it really easy to do all of this stuff. And, you know, go to your local meat market, go to your local vegetable garden and ask them if they will accept crypto. Go to your local brewery, tell them that you'll give them, you know, like places like AnyPay, for example, actually give you a percentage if people sign up to accept crypto. So there's all kinds of incentives in play for you to be using crypto in your everyday life. That's the world that I want to see.
That's an exciting world too. I think more and more when people realize that you can, there's alternative ways to pay. And I think that's one of the great things about Bitcoin is that we've set up this alternate rail of being able to pay people. And obviously Bitcoin is just the tip of the spear. There's a whole lot of cryptocurrencies that people can accept. If you want to accept Litecoin, accept Litecoin. If you want to accept Ethereum, accept Ethereum. And that's a great diversity of choice versus saying, well, you have to use this government dollar, this government fiat currency, the one that you have no control over. I think that's one of the things that really excites me about Bitcoin is because I know what Bitcoin is. I know what's going on with the network. I understand the economic policy of it. I know, that there's no changes coming to that except the ones that are pre-programmed in. Whereas what we see with the central banks, whenever they want to print another $1 trillion, they do it, and they rob you every time. They front run you first and foremost. They give the money straight over to their banker buddies, who then lend it out to you at 20% a year or whatever. That's a broken system. And Bitcoin's the opposite of that. Bitcoin is giving you monetary freedom, the Swiss bank account in your pocket and all that stuff. It's very, very powerful stuff. And you're removing yourself from this corrupt banking system when you hold Bitcoin. And of course, other cryptocurrencies are providing this whole new just explosion. I feel like it's this like evolutionary Cambrian explosion moment where we see all these different financial tools starting to come out across decentralized finance. So it's very, very exciting.
No, it's absolutely exciting. And I want to see people not just taking back control, taking their own financial sovereignty back into their own hands. I want to see people supporting those that are building our decentralized future. Because when you're using these services, you're giving a market signal that says, yes, this is something I want in my life. When you're going to your brewery and paying with crypto, you're telling them, yes, I want you to be using crypto. Remember, if things hit the fan and US dollar goes to nothing, then like, what are your options, right? If there aren't grocers around you that are accepting crypto, your crypto, I mean, is it going to be that useful for you? If you don't know how to spend this stuff, is it going to be that useful for you, right? So I think that people need to start to oil this mechanism, this crypto ecosystem, support the places that are already investing in this, and just pull your power away from traditional finance, inject it into the future, which is decentralized money that no one can control. Because people, as I said, they're so angry about what's going on. They're looking for alternatives, and this is the moment where we need to show them we have a better alternative.
That's right. And we have better If I think back to like 2017, we had this whole ICO boom and bust and all that stuff, and that was we didn't really have a lot of great working products. Like we had, obviously Bitcoin was working fine, and there were some other things that were working just fine. But if we fast forward to 2020, the entire crypto ecosystem, it's so good right now, and it's only getting better all the time. We have so many great wallets, we have so many great now decentralized services, decentralized exchanges, and decentralized lending, and decentralized insurance, and decentralized loans, and decentralized gaming, and decentralized content hosting services. And just it's wild. It's wild. You can actually start using this stuff, and some of these things you can use and get rewards for, and then some of these things you can actually just use to, make your everyday life just a little bit better.
No, absolutely. And I think that it feels empowering. It feels empowering to take control of your finances, to take the power away so that essentially when you're using traditional finance, you're asking for permission every time you use it. Every time you swipe your card, they could put a hold on things.
Please, Mr. Banker, please, can I have some money, sir?
May I please use my money? That's my money. Like, for example, the other day, a friend of mine said she tried to get her money out of her bank account, but she's been doing a lot of traveling, and her bank said, no, because, there seems to be some crazy activity going on, or we just don't want you to get money. Maybe they didn't have the money. I don't know. And she said, well, I want to get my money out. What do I need to do? What forms do I fill in? So she jumped through all of these hoops. And then they kept telling her, no, you can't get it out still. And she's like, what do you want? And then they were like, well, you need to provide documentation of all the places you visited and all this. She's like, what are you talking? Why do you need all that information? It was such an overreach. And then they eventually said, well, you already got it out $1,000 in the last week. That's enough. What do you need more for? As if it's their business at all how much money she's spending, how much of her own money she has access to. I mean, things like that should just send up giant red flags to people. I've had my bank account frozen before because I've sent it to something related to crypto in the early days, and my bank account freaked and was like, no, we don't deal with crypto. And I'm like, well, it's my money. I send it directly to this place, or I take it out and I send it anyway, but unfreeze my account because this is my money I want access to. Some people are not so lucky. Some people have their assets forfeited. Some people have their accounts seized. Some people have it frozen indefinitely. This stuff happens, and I don't think people realize how important financial sovereignty is until they're personally affected. Until then, people are like, my credit card's fine, all of that's fine. But there's so many things wrong with that. It's not just the corruption, like the corrupt system that you're feeding into and giving more power to, but it's also that you're not safeguarding yourself. I mean, identity theft alone is like $1 trillion industry. Every time you use your bank card, you're putting out details out there into the ether that hackers are always getting access to. JP Morgan gets hacked like every other week. All of your data gets stolen. We should be using services that protect us more. We should be taking more responsibility and care with ourselves, right? And I long for the day when the majority of people start using alternatives, because we've had a stranglehold in finance for so long, and people could get away with anything, and they could extort people, and they could charge whatever fees they wanted. We didn't have a choice. Like in Australia right now, there's a $10,000 cash limit on anything that you want to purchase. So basically what they're saying is it doesn't matter how much you dislike the banks, whether or not you want to give them your business, you are forced to use their services, whether you want to or not, whether you think they're a good or ethical business or not, you're forced to use them. I mean, that's a government supported cartel right there, that they're forcing you to use these systems. So,
and they charge higher fees, more ATM withdrawal fees, more account overdraft fees, more account maintenance fees. Don't have enough money? We're going to take money from you. It's a crazy system. And Australia actually is one of the more generous countries in their limitations on your freedom. If you look at some European countries, I think it was Spain's got like a €2,000 cash limit. And this is the thing, it's not this, the idea is that if you make a purchase using more than the allowed limit by the government, you're a criminal. You can get fined or put in jail for using cash as a payment. And I think you made some really good points about it can happen to anyone at any time. This is the thing. When you're using their system, they're in control. They own your money when you put it in there. If you want to support WikiLeaks, right? Hands off Assange. If you want to support
Right.
WikiLeaks, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to
You
do
want to
that. That's
you
why
want
they
to
started
buy
accepting
Edward
crypto.
Snowden's book right there. Edward Snowden's book. They're just going to seize the account that money went to and say, no, it's illegal. You're not getting any of those profits. You send him a crypto donation, that goes straight to Snowden.
That's insane. It's insane when you think about it. And this is the monetary system we live in. If you want to get your money back out of the bank, you have to beg, you have to plead, you have to hope that they're going to give it to you. I mean, hey, look, if you're rich and powerful, you're all good. But if you're anyone else that's not super rich and powerful, you are in a position of weakness when you have your relationship with the bank because they're in charge of your money. The second you give it over to them, yeah, it's hard to get it back. And that is a broken system. I think when you see the power of crypto that you can send money to anyone, anywhere, with no restrictions, if you want to support WikiLeaks, you want to buy Snowden's books, whatever, you can do that. You have that freedom to do these things. Now, I want to talk just a little bit before we end up our chat here about really the attacks on privacy that we've seen. So this Mexican beer crisis has been used as an excuse by a whole variety of different actors to increase censorship across the internet, as well as to try and get these different things through that are decreasing people's privacy. We're seeing attacks on encryption. We have these tracking apps that they're bringing out. I mean, it's just Orwell couldn't have written it better himself. I mean, I don't think that he even conceptualized how crazy things could potentially get.
Yeah, I think that when starting with contact tracing, I think that we shouldn't demonize that in its entirety, because it's absolutely possible to have a contact tracing app that is completely anonymous and that is privacy focused. That is completely feasible. It's whether or not the government decides to implement that or not, or whether, again, they use this as a facade for trying to sneak in more of their surveillance policies, which seems a lot more likely to me. I mean, they're doing that with encryption. You mentioned the attack on encryption. So you got Bill Barr, the Attorney General, right now, with Lindsey Graham being one of the major proponents by it. They put this bill forward called Earn It. And Earn It is a disaster that, again, they're using the guise of, oh, we're protecting children. And what it actually is, I mean, these have been the two most vocal opponents to encryption. They have been saying, like, literally, Lindsey Graham said about a year ago, said to Facebook, we want to access all messages on your platform. If you don't let us do this, we will do it for you. And then lo and behold, he's a major sponsor of this bill that comes out that will do just this under the guise of protecting children. So you get all kinds of bad policies come through, and it's called something noble, so that when voters look at it, they're like, well, I don't want to support someone who didn't want to protect children. And it's like, oh no, that's not what this is about. Like, this attack on encryption, it isn't just an attack on encryption, it's far worse than that. It's an attack on free speech. So there's a policy in America that basically gives a safe harbor to companies that host other people's content. And that safe harbor says that if someone else is posting illegal content on your platform, you're not liable for that, as long as you don't know about it. If you find out about it, you take it off, whatever. But it's like the linchpin of freedom of speech in America. If we did not have this, there would be no way that websites would be able to host anything. There would not be this freedom of expression that we see blossoming on the internet, because companies are going to protect themselves. They're going to err on the side of caution, because if they're facing jail time and bankruptcy, they're obviously going to be more cautious than they need to be. So what the government is doing is saying, we are going to take away this safe harbor from you unless you follow our detailed plan and follow our guidelines that we set forth. By the way, we haven't written those guidelines yet. This is a blank check we're going to give to the committee to write whatever guidelines they want. And lo and behold, Bill Barr is going to be the head of this committee. You know, that guy who wants to ban encryption because he thinks that it's, people who have private conversations online should be labeled as criminals. Yeah, he's going to lead this. And so what they're doing, I mean, you have EFF talking about this. You have Snowden's organization, Freedom of the Press, talking about this. You have WikiLeaks talking about it. Like, you have everyone who believes in freedom of speech and believes in privacy on the internet just in absolute shock and outrage about this bill, saying this is a ban on encryption, do not pass this. And I think that it's really hard to convey to people how important policies like this are, how important it is to speak out against them, how important it is to stop them, because when things like this get put in place. As we said before, these are called emergency measures. Either they're protecting children or they're stopping misinformation in the age of Mexican beer illnesses. Like they're labeled as these stopgap temporary things, and they are never temporary things. These policies last. The Patriot Act kept getting reauthorized every time it expired, right? And then it gets worse. They didn't just reauthorize the Patriot Act, which was the biggest invasion and overreach in privacy and a biggest step towards more surveillance, a totalitarian Orwellian nightmare that we've seen. They increased it when they reauthorized it. So, I mean, this stuff is dangerous. We should be vigilant against it. We shouldn't be, having these knee-jerk, terrified measures where like, just pass whatever, make sure that we protect ourselves right now. We need to be thinking about the future we're creating. Do we want an Orwellian nightmare situation where, we're living most of our lives these days on the internet, and we rely more than ever on robust security for those platforms? Do we want this Orwellian future where we have no privacy left on those platforms, where literally the only way to have a private conversation is to be physically with someone and have no electronic devices around us, because that could be listening as well? That's a scary situation where we're feeling like we're monitored with everything we do. People start to walk on eggshells. There's this chilling effect that comes across society. This is not a future we want to be creating, and we need to be exercising more than ever our freedom of speech right now. And like you mentioned these platforms that are censoring things, and I just, oh my God, like things, then they say anything that goes against WHO guidelines, YouTube is deleting.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff is chilling. On the one hand, YouTube can do whatever they want, right? And they're a private company. But it is chilling that they think that that's a reasonable thing to do. Right now, like I have a library platform, and I've had a library platform, which is like a YouTube alternative for years. And I've always thought of it as this sort of, I'll hedge my bets. I have this small community growing. I'll just upload my content there. I'll just mirror it so that it all gets there. That way, if my channel's deleted for whatever reason, I've got it all. And then last month, for the first time ever, one of my videos on library got more views than the same video on YouTube. I hit 12,000 subscribers on my library platform, and a video that was demonetized on YouTube, I earned over $300 for. So suddenly I'm going, whoa, there are real alternatives out there. Now, the trick is getting people over to those alternatives and getting them to frequent those, because YouTube, I think that they're killing themselves right now. Facebook, I think that they're destroying themselves. With this censorship, they're shooting themselves in the foot, because if people would flock to the internet because they wanted freedom of expression.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to be able to connect with people. It was this free flow of information. As soon as you start to inhibit that, people will start to leave. And before, it was harder for people to leave because they weren't alternatives. But you can bet that there are flourishing alternatives out there right now. So honestly, their days are numbered.
Well, that's the thing. We have the marketplace of ideas, right? So if we do have one place starting to not be as good as it used to be, then you will see people voting with their feet, and they will go other places. They will find alternative content platforms. Mm-hmm. And, it's trying to censor what people say or what people think, whereas really what it comes down to. We're talking about thought crimes here, right? You can't have those opinions. You can't have these thoughts. When you start to look at that, it's a very, very dangerous precedent when we let Silicon Valley and the tech overlords decide what is and is not acceptable to be discussing. And we've seen all these tiny little algorithm changes that actually more and more support the establishment, right? Some of the, for example, I think it was last year, they passed a new update to the algorithm that prioritized like MSNBC and CNN over alternative media sources on YouTube, like Jimmy Dore or Secular Talk or any of these kind of shows. They get deprioritized. So we actually see the official story, which is almost always lies and misinformation, actually being what is promoted as the truth. It's again,
it's ironic because YouTube was created as an alternative to CNN and MSNBC and Fox. Like, we wanted just a free flow of ideas, and that's what YouTube started out as. So that's a fact. Like that, what you're referring to, I think that I can't remember which publication wrote about this, but yeah, they started returning search queries on their site with like an embedded code that leaked the rating that your channel had. So as you said, like YouTube was manually rating channels with how like good they thought they were. So CNN would get a really high score, and then like maybe Crypto Lark and NBTV would be like have a low score, so that they just wouldn't show up in search results. Like this isn't an algorithm that's just making guesses. This is an individual at Facebook, I mean at YouTube, going through and manually choosing which channels people should watch over others. I mean, I think if they're going to do that, fine, but be transparent about it. Let people know that that's what your platform is about. Don't pretend to be this egalitarian alternative to mainstream media where anyone can post their videos, because that's not what they are anymore, you know. And then people can make an informed decision. Do I want to be on this platform that is very much funneling what I can and can't see, and what I can and can't access, or do I want actually to be able to access all kinds of things? Do I want to broaden my horizons?
That's it. And that one of the many reasons why I also upload all my videos over to libraries. So it's, you know, just important, just support the decentralized ecosystems, as well as just having that extra place where you can put your videos. Final thought for today. What are some practical things that people can do to stay safe online, to preserve their privacy?
Ooh, this is a really great question. All right, the number one thing that I would say is never use the same password twice. You should be having a strong password on every single platform that you're using. And you're thinking, well, I'm on hundreds and hundreds of websites. How could I remember all these passwords? Get a password manager. Honestly, this is going to be a lot safer than what's currently happening. Like recently, there was a Zoom hack, right? And it turns out Zoom was never hacked. What happened was you had all these other leaks, like maybe it's LinkedIn had their big hack, or maybe it's JP Morgan had their hack. And hackers collect passwords and then they try the same passwords on all these other websites. So hackers were able to access all of these Zoom accounts because people were just reusing passwords. This is the biggest security threat. That's the easiest to change. So get a password manager. Remember only one password for your password manager that's super long. Find one that is recommended by privacy experts. I think that Dashlane is a great one. I think that Freedom of the Press Foundation, they recommend that's one of the ones you can use. Some of them are better for Mac, some of them are better for PC, so check out their information on that. But do not ever use a password twice. I also don't just like change one letter in your password, because that's not going to help you either.
They'll figure it out.
Same thing. They figure it out. They just gets run through all of this automated process. Number two, update your software as soon as there is an update available. People so often just think, well, I don't have time right now. They keep putting it off. It says update now, and you're like, no, I'm in the middle of work. I can't do it right now. The reason why there are so many updates is usually because people have found security holes and they're patching them. So if you are not updating, the first thing that people do when hackers find out there's a security hole, they will absolutely try to exploit that security hole. They will take that hole and then try and see which accounts that they can access. So if you are not updating your software immediately, that's a big risk. And then I guess the third thing I would say, just to not make things too complicated, email is inherently insecure. SMS is inherently insecure. Almost every messaging platform you use is inherently insecure. If you're using Facebook Messenger, don't. It's inherently insecure. All of these platforms that, you know, purport to have good encryption, you know, that's all great, but encryption is a very complicated thing. Some encryption is absolutely already broken by the NSA. There does seem to be some encryption that seems to still be robust, and although we can't know for certain, experts have looked into these things and are constantly innovating and trying to make platforms more secure than ever. And so again, Freedom of the Press Foundation, which their primary focus is to make sure that journalists and whistleblowers are protected when they're leaking information. So they want you to be as secure as possible. I think that they recommend two messaging services. Snowden recommends two messaging services, Signal and Wire, and says that they are the most secure in his opinion. So if you're using any other messaging service, I mean, sure, maybe you like the stickers or something. Are the stickers really worth having a database of a log of the history of every conversation you've had that one day probably will be released? Let's be honest.
My Facebook stickers.
but my Facebook stickers. Yeah, Signal, Wire. I would encourage everyone just start putting everything there. Emails, even if you have Proton Mail, like Proton Mail is much better than things like Gmail, which is absolutely you're just creating a log for the NSA to collect everything you've ever written, right? But when I say NSA, this isn't this faceless corporation. You're saying that you're creating a log for employees, everyday people, to access all your communications as well. So you're just opening yourself up to major security threat there. So use Wire or Signal whenever possible. Whenever it doesn't need to be in an email, just use those things. And they're probably the three things that I would just mention right off the bat as ways to protect yourself immediately. Simple things, really easy things. They don't require a giant shift in your day-to-day living, but just, you start to think about those things.
There you go. Nice, easy, simple steps to follow, guys. Naomi, thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking about crypto, talking about the economy, talking about privacy. It has been a fun chat. And again, to everyone who stuck around to the end of this chat, thank you so much. And of course, there's a link down below where you can get subscribed to Naomi's channel. Naomi, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.